Welcome back to the Bootleg Corner. Without any interference, let's get into the agenda for the day. Dune Part 2 is the hottest topic out right now. It came out digitally on the 2nd or 3rd of April, and we've all been soaking up this superb experience for a while, but it is review hours right now, and we will take it from there. Now, to watch this movie, I had to go back to watch Dune 1 for a second time to confirm or disprove some ideas I had about the movie, and it couldn't have been a better choice when I got done with Dune 2. To sum up the entire situation, Paul Atreides is the man of promise and destiny who has finally caught up to his script, but not without setbacks and failures along the way. The Harkonnens have displaced the Atreides as rulers of Arrakis with their daring attack, which we saw in Dune 1, supported by the Emperor, who feared the rise of the House of Atreides would soon come to rival his own. A doctor within the House of Atreides was responsible for the betrayal that disrupted the Atreides defense, opening them up to attack, and all this happened in Dune 1, and we begin to understand why in Dune Part 2. Paul Atreides is a man stuck in the sands of destiny, both literally and figuratively. He has joined the Fremen, the roaming desert dwellers, alongside his pregnant mother, where their goal is to cross the desert to the other side. But they are not safe yet. The Harkonnen soldiers have pursued them into the desert, and this is where our appreciation for the visual effects in Dune 2 starts once again. I haven't seen anyone capture sand and the desert the way it was done in these movies. The scenes look so vital and alive, especially with the setting sun, that it makes you want to just steal the picture and hide it in a safe place. In Dune 1, Chinese narration says, "My planet Arrakis is beautiful when the sun is low," and that was backed up incredibly by Dune 2, where a lot of these scenes take place in the open and under the setting sun. The reddish brown color is just so majestic and alive, and it is insane the way that it was shot. But back to our Harkonnen soldiers, they are looking for the Fremen. They float up to higher ground on the rock to scan the area better, but then they are in unknown territory and get picked apart easily and sent into the belly of a sandworm to cover up the evidence in case anyone comes looking for traces of their arrival or where they went missing. In the meantime, Dave Bautista, who plays Rabban Harkonnen, is losing his cool in Arrakeen, the capital. He has not brought spice production under control as the Fremen keep destroying the spice production machines, and Rabban knows failure in Arrakis is not an option, so he's agitated to the point of paranoid, while his men can't seem to understand that there are higher stakes here. Rabban knows all it takes is failure for his uncle to depose him as governor, and so he's pushing his men as hard and as fast as he can, even daring to join them on the ground, where they invade the Fremen siege, only to find themselves surrounded and ambushed by Rabban, escaped by the skin of his teeth. Now, Paul Atreides is one locked in half step with a strange destiny. Stilgar and a lot of the Fremen see him as the promised Messiah, but within Paul is still locked a man, afraid and unprepared for the ending of his childhood. Now, don't forget, no matter the time gap in release for these Dune movies, these events are taking place barely weeks between the other, as we can still see the Fremen carrying the body of Jamis, who challenged Paul to a duel in Dune 1. So within weeks, he's gone from easy living without any major responsibilities to being just one of two remaining Atreides in the planet Arrakis. Everyone and everything he knows is gone, and his survival depends on his adaptability with the Fremen, who instead of seeing a foreign survivor are seeing their promised savior, Lisan Al-Gaib. I mean, talk about scary. Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson on her own, has her agenda in hand. Through her husband has been killed, and she and her son are refugees in the cruel desert under the shelter of the Fremen, but she was trained in and with Bene Gesserit creeds and prophecies, so she knows all too well about the promise of a savior from the outer worlds. She knows everything that has happened, has the fingers of the Bene Gesserits behind it. After all, we heard in Dune 1 that the Bene Gesserit plan spans centuries. Jessica knows she and the House of Atreides have been thrown over by the society who raised her, and so she goes about determined to fortify herself and fan the flames of prophecy, promising the savior from the outer worlds to the Fremen. Her son Paul is a weapon in the fight, and she knows just how much backing he'll need, even though he hasn't realized or wanted it yet. Drinking the water of life while pregnant shows just how far she is willing to go in this mission, and her convictions are complete. She becomes Reverend Mother to the Fremen, solidifying her position even further, and now with extended control and influence over this very religious sect of desert dwellers. I mean, who else can be the one to push the ideals of the prophecy other than the one the Fremen look to for spiritual guidance? Chani is played by Zendaya, and she's conflicted. She loves Paul, but she sees what his actions are doing to her people. Unintentionally, his actions to blooding with the Fremen has him fulfilling some written prophecies, and so the closer they get, the more she loses him. Slowly, she sees Paul go from untrusted outsider to becoming one of the Fremen, and spurred even further by Stilgar's ready exclamations and prophecy recitations at every instance. The Fremen are swinging over increasingly in believing that Lisan al-Gaib is indeed here. The Sandworms explain how the Fremen are able to move around the desert so quickly when they need to travel long distances. Large monsters that have somehow been tamed for specific purposes, and it leads me to think about human ingenuity and impulse for control. Now, watching Ark, the animated series recently, and seeing dinosaurs turned into house pets made me question if there are any animals humans wouldn't break if survival tactics came out to it. But then that's a question for another day, as Paul goes on to ride the biggest sandworm possible as his last test to join the Fremen, and if nothing else, this cements his place as the foreign savior promised by the Bene Gesserit prophecies. Now, how much of the prophecy is real and how much is not, because it seems Paul and Chani are the only ones who question its veracity. As said by Paul here, how much of the prophecy isn't just stories created and taught by the Bene Gesserit, introduced into a poorer planet to keep them subservient, while the Harkonnens can harvest abundant spice without the threat of resistance from the homeworld citizens. I mean, a popular quote from Karl Marx says, "Religion is the opium of the masses, and that has been affected in full display in Arrakis. Strip the people of their land and resources on one hand, while the agents of your empire promise them a savior with outlandish feats who will come from the outer world to lead them into prosperity." I mean, did the Bene Gesserit really expect these prophecies to be fulfilled? Because if you ask me, I do not really think so. Maybe they thought they were making it up as they went along, but exposure to spice interfered with their visions and made them deviate from their course, or something else, because as we can see, they were on the side of the emperor, even as reports of a Muad'Dib rose from the desert, and I think we can explain that as they had no Bene Gesserit agents on Arrakis to confirm or deny the rise of the savior. And even if there was, they had already picked a side which they thought would win, so in the end, it didn't really matter. For Josh Brolin, it has been a really storied career. From Sicario to No Country for Old Men to Avengers down to Dune, to name a few, he has been nothing but spectacular. Playing Gunn in Dune, he was chief of military forces for the Atreides, and the last time we saw him, he was leading House Atreides soldiers in combat against the Sardaukars and the Harkonnens. Well, he returns in this movie, deliberately going into the desert with a spice harvester because he knows the Fremen will attack. Now, the Fremen are hitting heavily at the Harkonnens, and he has most likely heard of a mythical savior, or at least a daring leader, leading these attacks, and so he's interested in joining forces with people who hate the Harkonnens as much as he does. I mean, imagine his surprise when that leader turns out to be Paul Atreides. Now, Gunny reminds me of his Sicario character, Matt, a soldier who just wants to fight, and with soldiers, they think differently. It's all about orders, chain of command, and execution, and this is where Chinese fears come from. Now, Paul is pulled even further, not just into the savior and religious status, but going into war to avenge his father. Her people too have been totally submerged into the prophecy, and for her, it is disheartening to watch. The boy she loves is disappearing from her sight just as rapidly as her people are championing new ideals. Now on to the next. Fade Rauta Harkonnen, our next big movie star, is played by Austin Butler, and now a lot of us saw him in the just concluded series Masters of the Air, playing a normal US Air Force fighter, and now he is a hairless, psychotic, vicious, and cruel Harkonnen. The Harkonnens in general seem to be the oddest bunch in the Dune universe, although we haven't really seen most of the other houses, but we can assume they aren't hairless, living in a world with a black sun, bathing in blood, and eating human flesh. They are a race of bloodthirsty fighters, always on the search for conflict and conquest. The Bene Gesserit put their plans in motion through him, acquiring a continuance of the Harkonnen bloodline through a sister in a new scheme that sees the Harkonnens take the Emperor's throne. Feyd-Rautha is incredible from all accounts, so driven and vicious that when he takes Rabban's job as governor of Arrakis, he wastes no time in running the Fremen out of the north where Rabban had been humiliated. Melting the rock where the siege was located was insanely diabolical but very on brand for Feyd-Rautha. Now to Chani, the atomic warheads are yet another indication of how quickly they've lost their ways. When Gurney says they have enough to blow up the entire planet, he shakes her to the core because that is where things are right now. Following a foreigner and his most likely madman general into a war that could destroy the entire planet if worst came to worst. Now we remember Stilgar had told Paul not to listen to the jinn when crossing the desert, but we see time and again where Paul ignores this, and that is what leads him to drinking the water of life and nearly dying in the process. Everything he was scared of, people chanting his name, fighting in his name, a holy war being fought across the universe, people dying of thirst, and all this can be traced to drinking the water of life. The things he had seen and was scared of fulfilling in his visions in Dune 1 became the things he would set in motion in Dune 2. Finding out he's also a descendant of the Harkonnens is also another catalyst to this. No more fighting fair. It was time to go ugly. Now, something else I want to talk about is the technology in this movie. It is so sophisticated but muted. Now, some other movies tend to go overboard with their futuristic sci-fi tricks of robots, nanotech and such. But in Dune, there is a solid and blocky feeling to the tech. Their ships are giant powerhouses with the necessary parts, though futuristic, but without the force of too much design. They just compose of parts that work and don't look so shiny in the eyes. I don't know if I'm explaining this well enough, but that's just the feeling it gives. Now the year is 10,190 and technology has gone so far they don't even use guns anymore. Inventions of the shields means the infantry warfare of fighting has gone back to gladiator style with knives and blades. As we see with Feyd-Rautha and Paul Atreides, their fight is swift and pointed. The choreography is so beautiful and the action flows so seamlessly. Now if anyone can learn something from this, it should be Zack Snyder, aka Mr. Slow Motion. Action scenes do not need to be put in slow motion so often for any reason at all. If anything, speed it up and give us the feeling of intensity rather than a drawn-out battle simply because the director wants to abuse the slow motion feature. Watching Rebel Moon, I was just so pissed off at all the action scenes because there was absolutely no need to bastardize it with slow motion. But back to Feyd-Rautha and Paul. Paul does win in the end, but not without serious injuries at the end. Now Stilgar shouting Lisan Al-Gaib make me laugh so much, but it took out the tension from the scene where the Fremen thought Paul would lose after taking a knife in the belly. We see how far Paul's visions have taken him when he states he will take the Emperor's throne and Princess Roland's hand in marriage as a way of maintaining the peace of the Empire, while Chani sits in the background at this shocking betrayal. Watching a man she has loved and welcomed into her home, accepted by her people, fought and struggled alongside, brush her aside for the daughter of the man who organized his father's death and the subjugation of the Fremen. I mean, that is insane. But Paul's peace strategy through marriage is already in jeopardy. The remaining houses have arrived at Arrakis with their soldiers and they refuse to recognize him as emperor, so the move to legitimize his ascension has already been rejected, and the much feared holy war he had visions about and should have avoided is already on the horizon. One funny scene that sticks out is where they break open the doors of the hall where the emperor and the Harkonnens are meeting, and while everyone is readying up to fight, meanwhile Baron Harkonnen is trying to crawl up to the throne. It's either that he hasn't registered in his head or he is so delusional and power hungry that he is ignoring the turning tides. Nobody even makes a move to help him as Paul approaches him with a knife and stinks it into his head. Now, there's a lot of parallels in this movie. A foreign savior who leads his people first into victory and now probably into doom. He captures the very theme of the movie that reaching extensively for power often ends up leading to destruction. We see it with the Emperor, the Bene Gesserit, the Harkonnens, and now it's Paul Atreides. Arrakis is like the poison chalice, beautiful from above, but treacherous on the ground. The major conflict in Dune was begun with Arrakis, and it seems fitting that it may end with it. The Fremen were the only ones to be successful in taming this planet of sand, and now it seems they too have been pulled into the orbit of conflict where they do not belong. A Messiah from the outer world means bringing the problems of the outer world to Arrakis, and while the religious prophecies have the Fremen in his clutches, Chani is the only one who understands just how much ruin is looming in the near future. Now to analysis, and this will be short because I have no problems and faults with this movie apart from the soundworms. And the question is, how do they all load up on it? Does it park somewhere for everyone to climb and do the same when they reach their destination? Because we see how hard it is for Paul to ride one, so we do not know how that works. But past that, it is totally a breeze. And then what is the first thing we look for in a movie? Believability. And what can we grade this movie for that score? Easy money as usual with Denis Villenueve. A1, 10 over 10 as usual. Everyone looking right and sharp. Total screen control for all characters. I mean, what else are you asking for? Watching Paul grow from quiet outsider to shouting on stage at the tribal leaders in the meeting, I mean, it was impossible not to applaud his growth. Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Dave Bautista, Josh Brolin, Christopher Walken, Zendaya, Timothée Chalamet, Austin Butler. I mean, it was a lot of guys in this movie, and everyone looked just right. I mean, ordinarily, it should be the least any director can do, but we've seen movies with crazy budgets and star-studded casts fall flat on their faces in the believability test way too often. Plots, pacing, fight scenes, I mean, what more could we ask for? Some directors use action as a crutch to hide an empty movie, but with Dune 2, I could watch them talk all day without the action, even though the action was crazy and amazing. So what can I say? A 10 over 10 watch from me. This is probably my second 10 over 10 of the year after Society of the Snow. We dropped in January. I did a review on that, so check it out. Dune 2 was very, very much worth the wait. Insane replay value, passed all the tests, and I'm sure it's already a front runner for every major award this year. This is still the Bootleg Corner. Don't forget to subscribe, keep it locked in, and I'll be back.